Hello, sir.
Kelly,
How are you doing?
it's that time of the week.
I know. I'm excited. This is going to be great.
Excited is my middle name.
I think anybody watching would know that that's your middle name. Excited.
Yes, oh yes again.
We've all known you to be quite exciting.
Folks, it's Monday night. There's a lot on Monday night. We know it. You know it. We all know it. But on this night, Talk and Tech Paranormal is feeling the vibes, feeling the love, and why shouldn't we? Folks, we just don't have some rock star cool guests tonight. We have some people that so many of you love, have been a part of, went and seen them, talked about them, saw them. I mean, guys, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, really, I have been trying for some time to get the opportunity to get on this show. Now blessed in this show with this sweetheart, Kelly Miller. But it was all worth it. Everything in the universe comes together for a reason. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you, we're about to walk down that aisle, get inside the octagon, and grab the mic as we welcome not one, but two Paranormal Pete rock stars. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. John Bullard and Amy Bullard. Woo!
Hello.
That was quite an intro. That was one of the most spirited intros I've ever had. However, I will say Amy's name sounded cooler whenever you said hers.
Yeah, I felt
Because I
special.
rolled it out. Well, why shouldn't she? Look at Mrs. Amy Bullard.
That's true.
You can have Amy at midday and the storm's blowing through, and Amy's like, "Is my hair okay?" she's a sweetheart. She's a sweetheart. I mean, everybody. I have not got to meet Amy or yourself, John, but everybody says the same thing. You two are just that couple who's not only done what they've done thus far in the paranormal, but just the down home people that are like, hey, come on inside. You want a glass of iced tea? Hey, let's talk about it. There's nothing that there's this, oh, well, look at us. And that's, I will tell you, in this field, that's kind of rare. There's a lot of, sadly, that's not the case. But you two have never lost that spirit of cool and kindness, and it shows.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. And I've been in the field for 13 years, and you are right. It's a small batch, but the people who are in the field for the wrong reason, they don't stay very long. And you see the trend. They come in, they do their thing, they get bored with it, and they go away. So the true investigators are in the field for the right reasons. You stick around, and it's a passion. It's either you could have a hobby or a passion. And a passion takes you over a decade, and the true investigators can understand that paranormal is a passion, and it is a long, tedious, tiring, frustrating process. But at the end of the day, we do it to help people and to kind of prove stuff. Obviously, I was a kid. That's what got me into the paranormal. But once I validated something when I was a child, that kind of just has built my passion. So, and no matter how high you are or how low you are in the field, it doesn't matter what you've done. If you're in the field for the right reason, we're all in the same playing field. So, one of my biggest messages to everybody in the field is stay humble. We're all in it together. And, for example, if I didn't bring Brad in to the house in between, it would have never led to Steve, which would have never led to the documentary. So you have to open your mind up. You cannot close off a location. And look, Alice's house is fantastic. I could have kept that all to myself, but you need another set of eyes. You need to have other investigators come in. And if you do it, the universe works with you and you see the end result, which is the house in between.
I mean, that's that very little spiel right there was the timeline of how you could see it coming in, taking it, bringing it there. It's a collective effort. And Kelly saw my shirt, but I go out. I go out when I go out, and I'm out and about. And we all wear colors, right? We do what we do. Our pride, our love. It's a rock band. It's something we, TV, what we do, we believe in. The people in it, not only with you guys being in it, but of course, Brad, Miss Alice, she's an angelic soul here on this earth to bring love to others. And then, of course, Miss Vera, her beautiful story. Kendall, who we all know is a rock star, we love. He's that brilliant man that brings his artistic style of how he envisions, he sees it, and then him and Steve collectively work together. Each one of you could tell how another piece connected to another, and then it all made this beautiful thing we know was the house in between. So that was why it was something to me, and then talking with Kelly, is I said, look, I've been really working hard to get them on a show, and now to get to share it with Kelly and to have this in this evening is very special. So it's super cool. So we're really excited to get into some of the things, not only about that, but your lovely wife, Miss Amy, being here is also special because I hear through a lot of folks out there in the paranormal world that she is quite the investigator.
She is quite the investigator. And
I've heard.
So I've been doing it for 13 years now, and we've been together. Our anniversary is this month, so it'll be our 7-year anniversary. She's been with me for 50% of my paranormal career. And when we first started dating, I thought it was cool because I was on Ghost Adventures once. So that was like my pickup line. I'm like, hey, I've been on TV. But
you old dog, you.
But
First date.
But she won up.
First date.
But she won up me because she's been on The Voice, and she's a singer. So if you need to have her sing, so I threw it out there, and then she kind of trumped me. And she's like, no. She's like, I don't know what that Ghost Adventures is, but have you heard of The Voice? So she's been on there.
And you just went, doop.
Yeah.
Never mind.
But she took to it very quickly. It's interesting. She's a nurse, and she's been doing hospice for a long time, which is a very unique job and something that I could never do. And you're a firefighter, I know that as well. So any first responders, police, firefighters, nurses, those are things that I highly respect because it's something that I can't do. That's a job that you go into that you just can't walk away and leave. Some of that stuff stays with you, and it just does.
It does.
So when Amy was put into the position, I remember her first paranormal encounter with me. We were doing a big event in Natchez, Mississippi. We had 3 locations, and it was a public event. We had like 30 people. We were rotating 10 people out to each location throughout the night. It was really cool. We had like a speakeasy. We did King's Tavern and a big hotel. And just seeing her natural ability, and like she didn't even know what was happening. That's what's so funny. She didn't know what she was doing, but she was just kind of like doing it. And it was just kind of funny to see me watch it. Because I thought at first she was just trying to fit in, but I realized that she wasn't trying to fit in. She was just naturally doing it. I was like, it's pretty cool. So that's why I decided to marry her. So.
Paranormal on the fly. She picked up with you. She had that. She kind of knew to just flow with it. And that's the really cool thing about even the things I'm learning from Kelly as doing what she does and how she's in tune with things. And you just kind of step back and you let those other people who have those other abilities, how you even learn from Amy that this is just how she is. But she has that, there's an energy, I'm sure, when she's somewhere that I bet you those spirits just kind of say, she's a helper of people. When you're helping people to the other side and those spirits see you and know she's kind, she's sweet, she's a caregiver, they know to talk to you because you have that spirit about you that's just so almost angelic. And I think that's a lot of how spirits get to be. They kind of warm up to you. And,
have you found that, Amy? I mean, with your paranormal journey, I mean, now being, with John these 7 years, have you found that development as you're investigating?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've really developed my skill set of how to talk to the spirits and how not to talk to them. I had some situations where I kind of provoked and it didn't turn out so well. So now I go in with a different mindset,
Sure.
than when I first started.
It's interesting because
I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
No, it's interesting. You talk about like chaos, and it's funny, like the most random scenarios throughout 7 years. she can be like, when Redbox was still a thing before streaming took over. Like, I just remember she was in a Walgreens and this guy like passed out in front of a Redbox and she started doing her nurse stuff. There's like so many different encounters where like she's just in the right place at the right time with people passing out in car wrecks.
Seizures.
Just like last week there was a scenario that she happened to be in the right place at the right time and she had paramedics that were called. And it's just funny. It's just weird that, because I don't know anybody else that has this happen as much as she does, but she just is in those moments where she's a first responder, where she shouldn't be there. She shouldn't pay attention, but she does. And she naturally just kind of takes over as a nurse. And it's just, I don't know. It's like she could almost write a book about those weird encounters that she just happens to be in front of. You know, they just present themselves to her. It's interesting.
Well,
Have
see,
you noticed
go ahead, Kelly.
anything? Oh, have you noticed anything with your hospice care? Have you had any paranormal experiences of your own or validation from spirit even?
Oh, good question.
Times too?
No, I try to keep that separate. That hospice nurse life, and I don't do hospice right now. I'm in a different field of nursing at the moment. But hospice will always be close to my heart. It's a very special type nursing. But no, I try to keep all that separate because I didn't want to bring anything in that would make people uncomfortable for whatever their various beliefs are. So I just shut that out, cut it off completely, and just know that this person I'm taking care of, it's a completely separate thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely bring the hospice with me into the paranormal. Like,
sure.
Experience.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to too something that Keith and I were talking about, the two of you, is that just from our brief discussions, the sense of ethics that the two of you have. Mm-hmm. I mean, trying to separate. I mean, I taught for 16 years in kindergarten, and first responder too, and I kept what I did very separately as well. But you still have those moments that you're like, oh, I'll have to remember that later, and journal it, write it down for myself.
Yeah. Now, there are definitely things that happened with some people before they passed over. Definitely validation from spirit, 100%. Yeah, but I wouldn't say anything or mention anything. I would just be like, okay, and block it out. But I didn't consciously, do that. It just, stuff would happen.
Right. And you're open to all their belief systems. And that's what's so important too. And that's much, I'm sure, like the two of you, when you're investigating, that was something else that Keith and I kind of touched on, that you have to be open to all these different belief systems, and you have to people where they are, right? Because, some of them know the implication of what that base is, and other people don't know. So in order to address them the way they need to, but that's what we were saying, we can really gather from the two of you, the level of ethics that you have, not only about, your daily life, but also about investigating. And we hold that in very high regard. So we're thankful for that in the two of you as well.
And y'all as well.
Appreciate that. Y'all too.
Well, I was going to ask something and not getting in any HIPAA type, any environment, but you doing what you do. I have another friend here in town who does that. Amy, have you ever had a situation that someone that you might have even got to just emotionally kind of really got close to, that you just felt, wow, your heart went out to them? That they might have had something they kind of held on to you a little bit, and they're maybe occasionally showing you a sign, hey, I'm here, or it's me. Have you ever experienced?
Wow. I have. There's a couple that really stick out in my mind, and I still feel them, to this day. And it's been years. But
that's so special because, if anybody, maybe even in their family, and that's one of the things about, I guess, with a hospice, is that, oh my goodness, it's, if they didn't have family, you were that person that might have been assigned to them, and they were like, Amy, you're all I have. You're it. So when I go, wow, that's so, I gotta stop talking about it. It's just so, it's almost emotional.
It's emotional. It is. You're still human, and
right.
You maintain your professionalism, but at the end of the day, you're still human.
Yeah, and that's one of the most personal things that you can do. When you think about a private residence investigation, and that's the reason I hadn't done them. I mean, and I've said this publicly a lot. I selfishly investigate for myself, and that's what I got into to validate for me. And I love history. That's why I mainly did historical places throughout my paranormal career. I did some private residence investigations, probably 3 or 4 years into my I guess paranormal journey, and we had some really bad experiences. There's some crazy people out there, and obviously there's a lot of rational things that are happening, and not everything is haunted. There was one case that we walked into, me and two investigators that worked with me for a long time, and it was a single mother of two children, and we walked into the house, and we have a questionnaire where I vet people, ask them the same questions before we travel to do the investigation, and obviously to try to see if their story remains the same or if they're changing it, And she was validated and she seemed legit, but we got there and we walked into the house and it was so filthy and just the neglect of the children. Like I should have called child services. And I just remember at that moment, I was like, I looked at my two investigators. I'm like, we will never do this again. I will never put you in this. We tried to make the kids feel happy and satisfied, and we left, and that was it. And it was another 1.5 2 years before somebody reached out to me for Alice, which thankfully I took that case because she wasn't far from me and was a friend of a friend who I knew. And obviously I met Alice and she's fantastic. But yes, when somebody opens up their home to you as a private residence, that's a special thing to do. Because if they're at the point where they want some strangers to come in and try to figure out if there's a demon or a spirit or something in their house, you can't get more personal to that. And flip side to hospice, Amy comes in as a hospice nurse and you get that bond to the people, whether it's the siblings, whoever's taking care of the parent, and you're there when they pass. I mean, how much more intimate can you get with a family? So it's one of those things where it's powerful. I don't see how she does it. I don't see how you being a firefighter, saving people and those moments. I mean, it just sticks with you. And unfortunately, I'm just not strong enough to deal with all that. So it's a lot.
Well, it's so one of the very cool things about, I guess, how it's like with myself is doing what I do. I look at people like Amy, and when we would go to the ER and be around the other nurses, there's all this level of respect of how I respect what they do there and how they work in that environment. They understand because we started having programs where nurses were like, I want to go be on that ambulance. I want to go see what it's like when you go to a location. And a lot of them were like, why don't you have this done? Why isn't this done? Why isn't this in place? And we're like, let's see. It was a car in the ditch. There was no lights. They were upside down. We had to cut the car in half, call Life Flight. I mean, and so after they started riding along and seeing our office, they were like, I don't ever I'll never say anything again about what those guys have to go through. When you go through the trenches of hell and blood and guts and eyeballs, and then you're like, oh no, we had to walk over one victim that was deceased to get to another that was alive, and to see that, they're like, no, I want off right now. Just get me off this unit now. I can't do it. So that's those levels of respect that you just kind of or add. And so I was blessed to get to have people that we got to sit down and talk to about those events that build up in our Rolodex when you see a child that they pass and you talk to them. So golly, I tell you, I still those times of those cries of the parents and going back and realizing that they're not going to get to have their child anymore. And then I had to look inside myself and then go out and call my son and say, hey, son, how you doing? And then realize don't take those moments for granted because they can be gone in the blink of an eye. So on to some things that are a little bit more.
I was like, yeah, we just killed everybody. Everybody's like taking shots right now. Like,
I can't do it. But how this goes into with the paranormal, we can see how when people have a family member that they've lost and they're still like, I think it's them. They're trying to come through, and we bring in our equipment. John's saying that, and that we do have to take that moment and say, is it this family member that's passed? and then by all means take that moment to pull back and not just say, oh yes, it's something much darker, because those words you tell that family can really affect them and think, oh my God, you just told us you have a demon in the house, which in fact they do not. So it's like, guys, take that time to investigate it. John hit it right on the head when you're talking about being respectful, professional, taking that time to pull back and try to really see what you got and make a more professional approach to it. But you know, I have to say, when you mentioned some of your cases and you about the kids, and you have you ever had it, John, where you've ever felt that there was just a time to where it had such a profound impact on you that you did have to take that time and just take a little bit of some breathing space to kind of collect yourself and readjust to some grounding?
Yeah, for sure. And this was a good example of that. It was a personal message to me. I was doing King's Tavern, which was the first location I ever did in 2008, and we did it again with Ghost Adventures a few years later. But with King's Tavern, there's something that's it's not demonic, but it's very tricky and sassy and will toy with you. And I'll never forget, my oldest son's name is Mason, and I never obviously talk about my children while I'm actively investigating in the location, but I'll never forget doing an investigation and listening to the audio and video a couple of days later and just the silence. And then all of a sudden I hear a Mason, haha, and like that. And it was a sinister male voice, and just hearing his name clear as day, silent EVP with a laugh after it. I just remember, it sounds dramatic, but I threw my handfuls off, and it's one of those things where you understand how real this is and how validated it is when something like that comes across, because that's a direct response to me. That's something that I didn't talk about. So you
Very
question,
personal.
how do they know his name? And why are you laughing after that? There's a lot of questions. It just kind of spirals. But I've had a few moments like that, but that was one of the most dramatic things that I ever had happen, was to hear his name and a laugh afterwards, because it just affected me to the point where, at this point in my career, I validated what I want to. When I was a child, I would hear voices, I would see shadow figures. I'm not a medium. There's people out there who have the gift and the skill set. I'm jealous, but I do have what is called a peek through the veil. I'm able to hear things. I can't hold it. So like in the house in between, you'll see a clip with me when I had the Justin Bieber swoosh haircut. I was in a cemetery with a night vision camera, and we were just testing out the night vision to see how far it would shoot with the new IR light we had on the camera. And we got a little boy's voice that says, "In here," and it's just clear as day. But I heard it with my own ears, just like if you whispered in my ear, but the other three people around me didn't hear it. And that's a classic example of what I call a peek through the veil. I have a sensory thing, and I am open and I'm sensitive, but I'm definitely not a medium. But going back to the King's Tavern, whenever that happened, it's just one of those things where you try to rationalize and understand what that is, but that's obviously a direct message, and it makes you think, I validated what I wanted to do. I have proven, I've captured evidence, and at this point, do I want to keep going on this journey and this path? Because if they're calling out my family and my kids, like, what else could happen?
Kelly, what's your thoughts? I mean, that's one thing. What I bring Kelly's in it, because Kelly definitely has that her way of her intuitive as well. What's your thoughts? Are they just that intelligent, or the spirits where they can be that way?
I think for sure that they really are. And I think you were smart to take that physical break by taking your headphones off and taking that break, because one thing I try to share with people too is you don't want to donate your energy to that. So if that being is doing something that's bothering you, a lot of us, if you're going to donate energy, really your response should be, you're not allowed to say that. That's not okay. Instead of saying, oh, I kept hearing this and now I hear it every time. And now I get it every time on the same piece of equipment, because you're then donating your energy to that. So taking that break was really smart. I do think that energies can do that, just as, darker energies, lower vibrational energies can mimic things that are comfortable to us. So, a kid spirit isn't always a kid spirit. We know that. So that's really important. So I think it definitely can happen. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you both too, kind of a little on your side of your documentary. So I got it the first day it came out because I couldn't watch it. I just like, as soon as Brad posted, I saw Brad posted, I'm like, I gotta get it. So I like hopped on and got it right away. Of course, like, just disregard anything else I had to do for an hour and a half because I wanted to see it. And I was amazed. It was well done. And it also lent that very human side and very ethical side to what you were doing and how you've been helping in this case for so long. So could you tell us a little bit about, your first steps with the case and, what you did at the beginning?
Yep. And you touched on a really good point, which is about something I have in my book a little bit, which is the energy. You think about, we always ask spirits, use our energy, use the device's energy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in theory, there's a lot. And EVP audio is one of my favorite things. That's just, I always think it's so neat because, especially silent EVPs, if you're capturing something that's a full sentence or a direct response, something that's intelligent, even if you have a skeptic, you have to have a conversation. And it's, we need skeptics in the field to keep us honest with what we do. But there's been so many times, and while we were filming The House in Between, we had this happen as well. You'll have an EVP, and me and Amy have had this happen before too. We were in a place, just me and her, and it's an old Civil War house, and we captured an EVP, and we had film, audio, we had video going and audio. So we could see us standing in the room, and neither of us spoke, and we captured an EVP. It was very clear. It was clear enough to the point where I didn't show it to anybody for a couple weeks. I'm like, this can't be accurate. But it was. But the weird and hard to sell was it sounded just like Amy's voice. But, the theory the theory is, you think about it, and we had this happen while we were filming, and it sounded like one of the investigators' voice, I won't say who it was, in The House in Between, and we had to throw it out. But I know it was an authentic EVP. But then I asked the question, like, if they're using our energy, why on earth would not use our vocal tone, right? So that's just something to think about. I mean, if they're using our energy, why would they not sound exactly like us?
And I think
think about that.
Exactly. I was just on an investigation this past weekend, and that was one thing. The few of us were like, "Did you say that? Did you say that? I heard it in your voice." So it's really something too where you have to be very conscientious of how you're acting in that moment, so you can look back and say, "Oh my gosh, was that you? Did you say that? Did you sigh?" I was with Flip, and he caught something that he was like, "Stop whispering." I said, "I didn't think he was whispering." And he said, no, he was whispering. But then when he played it back, one of those things was his actual whisper, but it just sounds different with the tech piece added into it.
Right.
So you have to really be in the moment.
You have to be very conscientious.
You have to do your due
We
diligence.
always say, like, Mark, John, whispered or that was my shoe on the floor making a noise.
If you can at all times, have a video shot on you at all times. You can go back and watch the footage. And there's 2 chapters in my book. One of them is called Structured Investigations. And this is what this is about. Because this book is for people who are into the paranormal and not into the paranormal. It's almost like a handbook of sorts. But what you're talking about, doing your due diligence and understand how we do an efficient investigation from start to finish. How to do it the right way. If you actually want to go in and be an investigator, take the proper steps, because we don't want people in the field that are going to muddle it. I did an interview one time with somebody said, with all the paranormal activity that's captured, why do you think that you guys aren't taken more seriously? Well, it's easy, because for every 5 investigators who are doing it the right way, you have 50 or 30 or whatever who are not, because they don't know any better. And I'm not blaming them, but anybody can get into the paranormal field. It's an open field. But to have the actual science and true data that we're trying to capture, it's a very small batch thing to do the due diligence the right way. So anyway, but going back to The House in Between and how we got started. So Alice reached out to a friend of a friend because they knew I do ghost stuff, and I'm local. I'm about 45 minutes from her. And she has had experiences in the house for years. The house was built in 1990. So again, it's not your typical mansion or Adams family house. This is just a normal private residence. Beautiful house, red A-frame. It definitely stands out, but it's nothing that looks creepy on the outside. And when they're having the house built, she had the doorbell would ring by itself. They would have tools move. She had some stuff happen as the house was being built, and she knew that. And as she built the family, she had a daughter. They would have things happen here and there, but it was never to the point where it really affected their daily living and their lives. So her husband did pass away, and it was not in the house. And she's a retired psychiatric nurse now, so she's in the nursing field. And, she continued to live in the house, and things got more dramatic, but not to the point where she felt uncomfortable living there. Until it was a couple months, she started having lights in the house, which was very odd. Bright white lights. And there's one night she was sleeping in the back bedroom, and she awoke, and these lights were like stationary, as crazy as it sounds. And she didn't know if it was a UFO. She didn't know if she was dreaming. She knew she was awake. It's one of those things where, like, you kind of second guess yourself. You're looking at it and you're seeing it, but like, this can't be true. So your brain's trying to like rationalize what's going on. And at that point, she didn't know what was happening. And, we live in Mississippi. We're in the Bible Belt. Obviously, it's not one of those things where you just openly say, my house is haunted, if you don't want to seem like a crazy person. In Florence, Mississippi, which is where the house in between where Alice's house is a very small town in Mississippi. So she quietly asked if anybody did ghost stuff or investigating, and kind of we linked up together. And meeting Alice the first time, like I said, I've had some really bad experiences. So I didn't do private residence for years. Meeting Alice was my first private residence case in a long time. And if you hear Alice talk, she's one of the most genuine, nice, funny people ever, right? And I could tell whenever I was talking to her, she was just so authentic. She was telling you exactly what was happening. She wasn't embellishing. She was just straight across the board. This is how it is. And I remember I was sitting on a couch in her living room, and there was a stairwell to my left that goes upstairs to the top room. And as she was talking, we were in there for about a half an hour. All of a sudden, I saw a shadow figure move from the bottom all the way up to the top of the stairs. And going back to my childhood, the first experiences I had with paranormal, my grandfather owned a junkyard and needed estate sales in a small town in Mississippi. And I used to go with him to clear out estate sales and stuff like that. And there was a few houses we would go into, and I would see shadow figures, and I would hear people talking. And I never told anybody this because I was like 13 years old. But seeing the shadow figure in Alice's house kind of brought me back to my childhood, because I remember that's what I experienced as a child. So it kind of like resonated with me. And I didn't tell Alice at the time. Actually, I didn't tell her I saw that shadow figure until like a few months ago. That was the first time I ever told her that. But I knew that there was something authentic happening in the house. I could, Alice was terrified. So I said, let's just do an investigation. Let's see what happens. We came in. The first night we did an active investigation. We called some audio, some EVPs. I had a door open. So we had some stuff happen automatically. And that kind of propelled me into this house. And it was kind of a blessing at the same time, because I finally found a private residence that was actually haunted. It was a legitimate haunt, had activity. And she was willing at this point to open up the house to me to document as much as I wanted to. So it was kind of like a paranormal laboratory, as weird as it sounds. Because at this point, she had moved out. After the lights happened, she had another residence that she could stay at. So that's when she decided to pick up and move out. And it did affect me too, because you understand, like, this is her house that she built for her family. She's lived there for so long, and now she is so scared that she had to leave the house. Like, that's ridiculous. So trying to validate and help her understand what was happening is what we did. And we did start capturing some stuff. I remember after our first investigation, I went back and played her some stuff, some audio that we captured and stuff. And just to see her face light up, it went from fear to like a weird happiness, to like validate that she wasn't crazy, that there was something there that she, could legitimize, that she wasn't just seeing stuff and she didn't have like a brain tumor or something crazy like that.
Right.
So, but and then it's been a long journey doing it over the years, and it was me and my investigators for a long time. We worked with local news to do some Halloween stories, and it just evolved to the point where we've documented some really cool stuff in the house, a lot of stuff that the whole world hasn't even seen yet. And then 5-6 years in, that's when Brad kind of came along. I'll kind of speed along. But Brad saw a news story, and we opened the house up. But before Brad even came, there was other investigators who wanted to come in. and we welcomed them in with open arms because we wanted to see what else we could capture. I understand that Alice's house is a legitimate haunted location, and you never know if you have intelligent spirits in a location how they're going to react to different people, different personalities, and different traits, right? So we want to document and help Alice, and that's the mindset that any paranormal investigator needs to have. Is if you're working with somebody or a location, you need to open it up to as many people as possible, because if you capture something and then somebody else captures something, it becomes a pattern, and that's one of the biggest things you can have in the field is to create a pattern. So that's kind of the process that we started.
You just brought something up there, right there, John. And now I got to pull the little box up. It's that time of the night for Keith to get on a soapbox, but not for very long.
There we go.
What is it about the paranormal that every time we get that little shiny piece of something, we got it, and it's like, oh, this is mine. It's all mine. It's my little something. Don't ask me about it. Don't tell others about it. It's mine. This belongs to me. I'm not sharing it with anybody. The entire, and I said the entire paranormal world seems to be on this. It belongs to me. That's mine. It's mine. I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm not going to tell you about it. Or the most famous words is, well, why would I tell you about that? I'm not going to go out and tell the entire world. If you happen to say, hey, this is going to happen, oh, wow, that's really cool. Congratulations. But so many people tend to have this near and dear, and they hold it, and they don't want to try to, oh, that's an opportunity for me. Me. And it's like, why is that? Why? It's as if you're really out there, to go out there and do this, what the paranormal was started about so many years ago, back in the days of poltergeist, and people didn't know what to do. And these few little people said, I think there's a way to go about this and help others. That then what came along?
Yeah, right. Well, but you go back, and like I said, audio is one of my favorite things. Go look at the history of EVP, which is in my book. So it's interesting. Plug. But it's interesting to learn the back history of stuff, though. Like the guy who, he wanted to validate a spirit voice. He brought in other professors and doctors and physicists, and they worked together, and they actually made some cool stuff happen. So if you have a location or you're trying to legitimize something, if you want to keep it to yourself, think about a fire. It's like you're smothering it. And when you cut off oxygen to the fire, what happens? As a firefighter, it goes out, right? So me in the field, I was in Alice's house for several years, and I did a great job because I'm a great investigator. But you need a new set of eyes, and you need a new set of people to come in and their theories. And Brad was not even a paranormal investigator, but he came in and he had his own process, his own ideas, and we started connecting and working together. And then we kind of expanded. And same thing with Amy, and then Sabrina, who does a lot of stuff with us as well. And everybody knows that I'm lazy. I hate history. I love history, but I hate reading history. So I like people to give me bullet points. I need a one sheet. I need one sheet. Break it down.
Organized.
Yeah. You read the 300 pages, give me like 10 facts, and I'm going to sound cool. So, but, like Sabrina does a great job. She's a great investigator. But we did an investigation last night. We're still actively investigating Alice's house. We have some really cool stuff. It's really great. I would love to tell you about it, but I can't. So
that's okay.
Yeah. But so she logs stuff, and like she's such an important part of the process. But like if we didn't have her, we would be cut off to the knees. We're a full circle, with Alice and Brad and Amy and Sabrina and myself, and bringing in Kendall and Vera and Steve. It takes an army to build lightning in a bottle to show the house in between and show the process. And whenever I started, I got to a point, but I needed Brad to come in to push us forward. I needed Amy. I needed Sabrina. And then we got to a point where we couldn't do anything else. And the reason we called Steve is because he has such a great reputation in the field. He's one of the OGs of the paranormal.
Right.
He was doing ghost hunting before ghost hunting was cool. And if you want to have somebody that will debunk anything or will throw it out, that's the guy. So what we wanted to do with Steve was, we know this is a legitimate haunted house. We know how incredible it is. We can show you some documentation. Obviously, we have video, we have audio, all this stuff. We wanted to lay it out to Steve, let him come in and do his Steve thing. We have a thing that's called the Steve filter because he throws like 80% of everything you get out. And that's okay. When in doubt, throw it out.
Right.
But we wanted to open up the house of Steve to see what he would think. And obviously, it intrigued him enough to be a director of a documentary and be in a documentary as well. And we have physicists, we have scientists that are in the house in between. And, we did that for a reason because we want to understand. And if you disprove something and you say, hey, this is why it's happening, there's a rational reasoning, that's great. We want to understand that. However, it's great to see when they can't. Because, again, we know how authentic this house is.
Yeah. Miss Alice is in the chat room, so we want to reach out there and say, hi, Miss Alice. We see you. We're looking forward to the day we can get you and probably Brad on the show. And then today we can get Kendall. And then, of course, Miss Vera. And we'd love to get Steve. I just don't know that Steve too much does to me. Talks shows. I don't know if he does or doesn't. That'd be really cool. But, if we think about what did Steve used to do before he got into the paranormal, what did he do? So he was a police officer. Right? He was a police officer. So investigative steel, type, that goes right into with the paranormal, right? And your skills, you're going in, you're spending that time. So,
and watching him work, watching Steve work, he is methodical, and he's so brilliant. By the way, he's an amazing drummer. If you didn't know that, he can rock drums.
I actually do know that he's a drummer. I'm wanting to have an event when we get out there, and we've been together. Actually, we've got to be out there at several events together. And I got to tell you one thing about Steve. He's actually very quiet. He's like, so. One of the things you'll find that's interesting is when we're out there is you'll find that these lights, when they come through, they have a certain glare on that wall, and that's possible. That's a possibility. He's very quiet. He's just, like you say, he's very thought provoking. He spends that time. That's interesting, but he doesn't.
One of my favorite parts, I didn't mean to cut you off. One of my favorite parts of the documentary is at the end. If you watch the last 10 minutes, you see, you know what I'm talking about, the chaos ensues.
Right.
The front door that opens, if you look at it, there's a point where like he's trying to rationalize what just happened, and you can literally see his eyes go like this, and you can see his head just like turning. Because he's very methodical, he's very on point. So when something confuses him, it's so rare, but it's just like, I don't know, that was one of my favorite parts of the documentary, just watching his face trying to like rationalize what just happened.
Well, he tends to laugh. He sees me and he goes, he'll laugh and he'll say, I'm glad you're here. I bring a lot of equipment. I've got a huge, big Pelican case that's on the top level, then down to the bottom. And I bring a lot because honestly, I hand out a lot of equipment to people to use. If they don't have any, I bring it. And then I try to do a real quick little briefing about the equipment and how it works so people can learn as well. But he laughed one time. I had one of my FLIR cameras, real nice big camera, and I'm getting it on. He goes, oh, let me see that. And he puts it underneath his arms, and he walks away. But he laughed. It was him and Tango was there. It was Grant. Johnny Zaffis was there. A lot of really great people were at Pinthurst, and we had an amazing investigation. I tell you, that was one of the most active. And for the most part, the stuff there, when you're at Pinthurst, it's paranormal.
It lives up to the hype, huh?
It does.
It's paranormal. You could say, it's paranormal. That wasn't a bug down there. It's way at the other end. It doesn't have wings. It's not a dust. That had its own anomaly that lit. Anyway, it's a blast. So we have that. So one of the things is that we had talked about and getting an opportunity to get you here on the show is tell us some things about what was one of the things for you when you think about it, John, that got you to writing this book. What kind of took you to the point of where you said, you know what, I'm having some things I'm thinking. What got you to say, I'm going to write a book? What was that inspiration when you said, you know what, I want to tell my story? What was it? What would you think?
Now that I did it, I'm an idiot. I was kidding. So writing a book. Writing this book,
goes, whop!
writing this book, and she'll tell you the frustration. I lock myself in a room in a corner, and we have a chaotic, busy life all the time. But so this is definitely the most challenging thing that I've ever done. Because if I want to do something, I want to do it the right way. Even to like doing this podcast, like I want it to look good. I want it to be the right way. We have ethics, and we want to do. If you're gonna do something, you do it the right way, and that's something that I instill in us, our marriage, our children, paranormal, everything like that. If you're gonna do it, you do it 100%, or you don't do it at all. And I've had this thought process for about 7 or 8 years to write a book. And I just never thought that I was at the point where I was ready. But after doing the house in between and kind of just putting it together, I have a lot. I could talk for 5 hours on paranormal, about the locations, about the audio, about the tech.
I'm excited.
There's so many things you talk about. I think one of the most challenging things for me for writing the book was to break down the chapters, to kind of like decipher what I wanted to talk about to make it flow. And I think I did a good job of it. But breaking it down to like the locations. I have equipment. That's a section which you'll love to read. I chose 10 items as my equipment that is my go-to. And again, this is something that's almost like a paranormal handbook, but it's also teaching people who are not in the field and kind of explaining what we do and why we do it. And a lot of the items that I chose for my equipment pieces that are highlighted are not necessarily meant as paranormal tools.
We borrow them. We do borrow them from things that out there that, but like you've said it before, it's more leans towards the scientific way. This detector, this motion detector, goes off for a reason.
Right. Well, and one of the things in equipment, one thing that I chose to put in there is one of my 10 is music. And, music's a universal thing, and it's something that I use in every one of my investigations. Whether you're playing 1920s music or you're playing up-to-date music, it doesn't matter if you're in Germany doing an investigation or you're in wherever, like Africa. Music literally is a universal language, and you can get a response. And we have gotten a response several times using music. So I think that's one of those things to make people understand that, like, it doesn't have to be your spirit box and your REM pod and this, that, and the other, which are great tools and they serve their purpose. But understand, and the point of the equipment chapter is to do your due diligence. And do you understand why you're using that piece of equipment? Do you understand what can trigger it? Do you understand what gives you false readings? Do you understand, and it's all about using the stuff together. Use the millimeters and do the temperature and the EMF and the REM pods. Use it, but then use yourself and use all of it to kind of put a puzzle piece, put a puzzle together. And in the book, I open up stuff about locations, some of my locations that I've done that kind of stood out to me, really dramatic things. Whenever I do a podcast with the paranormal, one of the most common questions that people think is going to be the coolest question is, what's the place you won't go back to? It's like, I've never heard that before. So, so I always say Villiscac Murder House is one of the places that I had some really dramatic stuff happen to that I'll never go back to. I'm not interested in never going back to that location, but that's in the book. A lot of behind the scenes stuff that kind of built me up. And the locations, the way I did it, there's 7 locations I chose. And it starts off as my very first location, which is King's Tavern. And it goes into where I am today. And it kind of circles back around to a private residence that I lived in. Where I had paranormal activity come back and follow me back home. It kind of ties it into like these things can follow you back, and you need to do your due diligence to understand if you're going to be an active investigator and go into some of these haunted locations and actively investigate a lot. You need to protect yourself and understand that what you're doing can follow you back. It's like stepping in gum, as the famous Conjuring movie says. So you need to do your due diligence. Another chapter that's in the book that I'm excited for people to read is Doppelganger. So
wow. Probably about the rarest thing in the paranormal. It's super rare. Like you ask people about that, and even with Grant Wilson, God love him. I mean, what a great guy. But you ask him about that, he's like, I've had, I think, one time, and they had a case, and literally it was a woman, and they knew that the thing with the doppelgangers is that there's something about the spirit, that's the doppelganger, that something's not quite right about them. Something's off. And it's the trick is to get the other one to see them, and then they're like, then they know, then they have to go. And
Yeah,
Grant-
it'll be a very interesting chapter. I'm so excited for people to read it.
I'm excited already.
Well, the art, which Amy will yell at me for, I started out small, so I found an artist. He's actually from Chile. So shout out to Andre, who's my artist, and I met him on Instagram. I knew what vision I wanted for the book. I knew I wanted a charcoal painting drawings because I wanted to. I don't like to read. I don't like books. We've already established that. I don't like history because I don't like to read. So what
Kelly,
I wanted to do,
that might be one of them, Kelly. That might
There
be
you
one
go.
of the questions.
Yeah,
so
maybe.
what I wanted to do is I wanted the book to be very heavily visuals to tell the stories. So this artist has been incredible. I've written 12 to 13 pages of examples and things that have happened to me. And he actually translated back and gave me some really cool visuals. So throughout the book, there's incredible pictures and paintings and stuff like that. So I'm really proud of it. It's been a long process. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. And I really hope people enjoy it. It'll be out this fall.
Awesome.
Golly,
That's awesome.
wow.
And then where can people get it, John?
So it'll definitely be available on Amazon because you can get everything on Amazon. So BMKPublishingUSA.com. BMK Publishing is the publishing company that I'm working with, so you can get it through there. It'll be available through some other retailers as well. For sure, I know Amazon is the #1 retailer. If you want to get it, you can order it on Amazon. And follow me on Facebook. I'll let you know when you can start pre-ordering that, which it's written, it's done. We're in the final processing of scaling it down, get everything correct. So we're real close to having it finished.
Well, I want to. I talked to Kelly, but I'm going to buy several myself, and I do want to get them autographed because what we're going to do is for some gifts for our Love and Light listeners and knowing the show, is that to have the book, have it signed by you, and then we will give it away to those really standout know the show listeners. And here comes one of the questions for the Love and Light listeners. So, John, tell us one thing about yourself that you do that others wouldn't, that others may not know about you. That something that you like to do or go or do something that they don't know about John Bullard.
Interesting.
Amy's laughing. Yes.
No way. We
I
all
know.
ask Amy this question too.
I know, but yeah.
I want to do this. I want to hear Amy's answer first, and then I'll answer.
Well, let's see.
What do you think? What do you think that my answer would be, and then I'll answer.
Old fashioned. He likes to enjoy himself a good old fashioned.
So I
An
love
old-fashioned drink. Oh, Mike Ketching, one of my best friends and me had the running joke because, if you're not watching, my brother John Bullard loves his old fashions. There you go.
So my day job, I'm a marketing director for 30 restaurants here in Mississippi. So I am a hardcore foodie and I love mixology. So like Bar Rescue is one of my favorite shows with John Taffer. So yeah, we have that's a whole nother project. But yeah, so we yeah. But so things you don't know about me. I love to cook, I love to clean, I love to make cocktails. There you go.
There you go. And that's some very cool stuff, right? That's John Bullard doing
I'm a
his
lucky
thing, right?
girl.
Well, hey, and I'm a blessed guy too, as you can't tell. Looking at me, all the 286 foot 5 pounds of me. There's literally a chef in the house here. That I think.
Well, what about Amy? Amy, what do you do?
So that's interesting. So now we got to do that. So here's Amy. John's wheels are spinning.
No, I already know. I can answer it 100% very quickly.
Okay. All right. So what is something people don't know about the lovely, amazing, enchanting Mrs. Amy Bullard? What would it be?
Incredible songwriter and singer.
Oh.
Okay. So look at there.
Very
She's
cool.
So sweet.
Oh, see there. So would that be something you say people don't maybe know about you, but that's what you do? Wow. That.
Yeah.
It's funny. Every for some reason, all these haunted locations we go to always have pianos, and I have so many videos of her sitting down and playing pianos and singing. Last night you were singing.
I was.
But that goes back to the music, and you never know what can draw somebody out. And her singing that voice, Rocky Springs, Mississippi it's an old town. It's a ghost town now. She was
It would have
singing
taken
there.
out my yellow fever.
She was singing there And we got one of the craziest, clearest EVPs of her after she finished singing. It was a woman that said sadness. It was as soon as she finished the song, it was just clear as day. One of the coolest things ever. So it's one of those things where I play music, but if you have the ability to actually literally play music and sing, that's a whole nother, there's things that she can do that I can, and that's one of them, that can entice the spirits.
Well, we have another
I feel
question.
like John actually does have a good voice. But...
What's the other question?
Well, we have a question from our friend Tracy. I'll put it on the screen for you guys. She said, we always hear about the scariest stuff you've seen, but what about the kindest spirit that you've seen? Is there a spirit encounter that's been particularly kind for the two of you?
Yeah. So for me, with the house in between, I always tell people, being there over a decade, I know it sounds strange, but it doesn't to me. And that's another chapter in my book. I hate to keep plugging it, but I have a whole chapter.
No, that's what we're here for. That's what it's for. That's what it's for.
I have a chapter in my book called Teaching the Spirits. And that's truly what I feel like we've been able to do at the house in between and Miss Alice's house. With, if you watch the documentary, you see the chandelier, and that didn't happen by chance. That was 3 years in the making when we decided that could happen, and then it started happening on command. If you watch the documentary, obviously you see the baseball, but you don't know the work that went into doing that. So if you watch the documentary, you're watching an hour and a half. But we set up the baseball on the stairs, and we tried to have that baseball come off the stairs, and we verbalized it so many times. It was over 6 months that we tried to have that ball move, and it never moved. And it's one of those things. What's the saying? If you keep doing the same thing and you expect different results, it's like insanity, whatever, right? But with the paranormal field, that's the exception. It's like you don't know how long it takes. You don't know the reverb from what I'm asking you to do to how they understand it and translate it, and we don't understand how much energy it takes to actually produce it. Because we understand that, if we ask for something, maybe 3 or 4 days later, we're getting a response. Maybe that's instantaneous on their side. We don't know, right? But going back to Alice's house, we've had several different mediums throughout the country come to her house. And here's my open thing about mediums, and I'll be very blunt because that's how I am. I think there's people who have a great skill set and really are truly incredible. I think there's people in the field who claim that they have mediumship and they don't at all. And again, it kind of muddles the whole thing. So we've had some mediums that come in the house. I've actually caught 2 or 3 different people in the house faking stuff with Alice, and we called them out. It's been really uncomfortable. But we've also had several people in the film. Jill, who's in the documentary, totally incredible. We never met her until we started filming the documentary. She was absolutely amazing. If you watch it, you see the drawings that she did. You see the fire alarm go off in the house. One of the coolest parts of the documentary. But the consensus with Alice's house, it is a spirit hotel, a spirit portal. So there's entities that come and go. So it's always kind of like a revolving door. And that's one of the cool things with Alice's house is because I have a short attention span. But every time you go into Alice's house, you never know exactly what you're walking into. Sometimes it can be really aggressive. Sometimes it's more calm. You never know what's going to happen. However, there are 2 spirits we feel that are attached to the land, a male and a female. And this all ties back to the question. Lily, which is the female spirit we've given to the resident spirit at Alice's house. Is that her name? No, not. But that's the name that we've given her, and that's the identity that we've given her. And we have the same female voice, same vocal tone over 10 years. So she is very sassy. She's very charming. She's very sweet. So to me, Lily and Alice, if she's watching, she would smile right now. She is definitely our resident spirit who we have heard likes to have tea parties and likes to have her drinks and cocktails and likes to dance around. So, and touching on that to be interesting as well, another reason that I like EVP is your vocal tone. So a lot of people know, your fingerprints are unique, right? So if you get arrested, Keith, that's why they fingerprint you, because your fingerprints are unique.
Yeah.
But your vocal tone is unique as well. So whenever you're doing EVP and you put it on the software, if you can hear those same vocal tones through a long process, that's really, really interesting. And that's another thing that you can have a conversation with the skeptic. Ghost Adventures did a great episode on that with Johnny Cash's house in Jamaica. They did they captured an EVP which sounded a lot like Johnny Cash's voice. And then what they did an interview with Johnny Cash, and they showed his vocal tone pattern. They overlaid the EVP they captured, and it was almost identical. So pretty interesting.
Wow. And that is interesting when you're able to take those sort of dynamics and see how they just literally flow together. And
Yeah.
I've noticed that more and more now with Ghost Adventures. They've really started to get to be to where they're really doing self-debunking, to where they're getting in there and saying, this is what we documented, this is how this is, and this is why we backed it up. And so they're starting to realize it's beginning to be a field to where if you don't have that level to where you're going to police yourself, you're just going to be left out in the parking lot, because people are going to stay. And do you agree, Amy and John, that the audience are beginning to become more educated about how they are a lot more in tune about knowing about the paranormal, and the ones who really want to get to see the shows rather than necessarily from an entertainment standpoint?
Yeah, I think maybe some people are kind of over the whole jump scare type of style show, and they're really interested in digging in and using a lot of the science and debunking to really truly validate, and not just, they don't want to just be scared.
Right.
Well, and we have Zach, and we have Aaron, we have Steve, we have, so Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures. Those are the two OG shows that were there before it was cool, and they really opened a lot of doors to people to be, they put the paranormal into pop culture, which made it a lot more accessible to people. But yes, as you grow the field, more people are in, the more people you get involved, the more legitimate you have to become. It's like any small business you start, you can do some real hokey stuff, but once you get to that big level, you got to start being legitimate. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly.
We have another question from Steve. And speaking of shows, there's our buddy Bob. He's sending something else. I clicked by accident. Let me go back here. Steve says, have you ever submitted a video to the show Paranormal Caught on Camera? That he loves that show. In any of your other cases, have you ever shared on that show, or maybe anywhere else, shared that evidence?
So I'm going to plug the book again. I'm going to do it. So do it. So A Peek Through the Veil. It's my book. It's coming out this fall. Great question. I have not, but there's an entire chapter that's called Paranormal Pursuit that's in my book, and it is something that I've done for 13 years, and I have interviewed for over 20 plus shows in the paranormal. I have done countless interviews and had shows pitched to me, and I've given my ideas, and that whole chapter is kind of about that whole process. So just seeing that question kind of brought that up, and it's interesting. I started off by asking, have you ever seen the show? And it was a show that I was pitched for, so obviously I know you hadn't ever seen it. My point was, us in the field, I'm never going to say that I didn't want to do this as a living. If I was able to do this and have a TV show and make a career out of this, then 1,000% I would, because it's my passion. And I think that any paranormal investigator who says they don't want to be famous, they don't want to have a show, I think you're lying. I think that if you have a true passion in the field, then you would want to do this as a career, right? Am I right about that? So, it's one of those things where if you were paid to do what you love, you would do it. So, yes, throughout my 13 years of investigating, I have interviewed for countless shows. Obviously, I've gotten to certain links, but it never panned out. And I'm blessed enough to be able to be a part of the house in between, and it has some success. But yes, I've definitely had a paranormal pursuit, and I've tried to put myself out there, because being able to, and it's not about being famous. It's about having a crew behind you, and to be able to kind of expand on what you do as an investigator. For people to pay for you to go to these locations that you can't afford to go to and investigate and document, that's the whole point of being on a show, is to highlight and elevate what we do as a genre.
That's really what you said right there is, and I've talked to Kelly about it. I don't think it's a level that we talk about necessarily just by a fame, because we know that can be short lived. We know that can happen, and it's there, and a year goes by, and then it's gone. So very rarely are there shows that have lasted a decade or even more. First year is like you got it picked up. Wow. Second year, that's amazing. 3 years, that's almost unheard of. So,
Well, and you look at it in any field you do. Like if you're a musician and you're telling me you don't want to be famous and have an album, you're a liar. Because
yeah,
you're a musician, you love making music. To be able to be successful at it and make a career out of it, that's anybody's dream. Same thing as an artist. You hear about starving artists. Well, obviously, if that artist became famous and his paintings were selling, he's not going to hate it. That's his passion. That's what he loves to do. So it's the same thing with the paranormal investigator. Obviously, I think we all strive for the right thing. And if you're in it for the right reason, then you want to make a career out of it. I think that's a great thing to do, and that's what I've always wanted to do, and I'm proud to say that that's what I've always wanted to do. There's no shame in saying that you want to be on a paranormal TV show, and it's funny to see the people knocking paranormal TV shows and people that are pro shows, this, that, and the other. And I understand that obviously if you become on a TV show, there are certain expectations, and you have to, you lose some of that creative control. But at the same time, if you're in the paranormal, you have the passion. If you have the opportunity to do that as a living, you're going to take the chance.
yeah, I think that's a good point, and you bring up a very good point with that, and that's the thing. I tend to see that you see some amazing people that are out there doing the paranormal, and they're not famous, and yet same thing the other way. You see a lot of people that are in the paranormal, and yet you almost tend to wonder, is it that there's still that's that passion, or does it ever get to be that there was something else that they failed at, and then somebody walked up and handed them, said, here's a K2, go be an investigator. Because I think and that's what's sad about it, there are those people who really want to go and do it and have a passion, and even others say you're really good at it, but they never get the nod. Maybe it's the look, maybe it's something else. And then you tend to look at the ones who are getting the nod and you ask, what does that person have that you don't have? And when you think about it, I mean, you tend to wonder what's the answer. It's like, why does And it's like,
well, and there's so many, but there's so much stuff that goes behind it too, because and selfishly, like as an investigator, I think we all think we're good. I think I'm great at investigating, but there's so much that goes on behind. Like to take a show to be greenlit, it takes a lot. There's a lot, and it's crazy because you see the crap on TV and you're like, it's right. You're like, this made it on TV.
That made it. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
That's the point.
Yeah.
That made it. It's
Yeah.
like, come
What?
on.
But it's interesting. So I listened to Armchair Expert, which is Dak Shepard, which Kristen Bell, who like Frozen, all that stuff. Anyway, he does a great podcast. He does a lot of stuff. So Jason Segel, who's in a lot of movies like Forgetting Sarah Marshall and stuff like that. I was listening to his podcast the other day. He's a famous guy, writer, director, and it was interesting to hear his thought process on writing shows and being greenlit. And it's crazy, even if you have stature or you're famous, the stuff that you write that is truly incredible that doesn't make it to film is just crazy. So it's a roll of the dice. You have to be in the right time, right mindset, and just and I'm blessed. We're blessed. The house in between, we never knew how that was going to be received. I'm sorry. I remember the night we came out May 5th of 2020, and we did a little celebration at Alice's house when the documentary was released, and we were all hanging out, having a good time. And I'll never forget that a close friend of mine that I've known for years messaged me on Facebook, and they had watched the documentary that night, and they said, I love you as an investigator, but I hate to tell you, the documentary is awful. And they were being honest. And I'm like, wow.
I was like, harsh, dang.
Yeah.
But my point of saying that is, you do what you do for the passion. You do what you believe in. And we knew what this project was about. And coming from where we are here, from May 5th, 2020 to where we are now, obviously it had great success and it's cool to see. And I think this wasn't a jump scare. This wasn't hardcore paranormal. So it was definitely a different take on the paranormal documentary, and it worked. But it's one of those things where if you have a passion, whatever it is, I think you see it through to the end, and it'll be received well.
Wow.
I think so too, and that's really important as you carry on to your other project, your book and any further investigations that you do there, because you have that experience, but it's also, I'm sure, just a growing and flowing one onto the next encounter or next project. So I think that's definitely really important. And then I wanted to ask you both if you didn't mind sharing any social media links where people can find you or ask you questions that they may come up with in their last few minutes after the show.
Yeah, for sure. So for me, John Bullard's easy to find. So John Bullard on Facebook, John Bullard on Instagram. You can go to John Bullard Para.com, and it keeps up with all my little paranormal happenings. So Amy, I'll toss it to you. Anything?
I am Amy Bullard on Facebook and Instagram, so also super easy to find. I don't share as much as John does. I'm a little more private with my social media, but with like having children and
Sure.
But I still
well, there you go, everybody. You can find them both, and it's very easy to find. That's great. That way, sometimes our listeners I know have reached out to those on the show with a different question that maybe they wanted to ask more privately instead of in the chat, but also to follow your progress. So thanks for
for sure. And thehouseInBetween.com, obviously it's on 26 different platforms. So literally anything that you have streaming, you can watch The House in Between on. And shout out to Steve and Kendall and Vera and Corey Frost, our editor, Brad, Alice, everybody who was a part of the film. And it really was like catching lightning in the bottle on that. And we do have some updated and upcoming projects coming up that we can't talk about, but definitely some really cool stuff and some out of the box stuff for me personally that is going to be interesting. But yeah, we're excited for 2021, 2022. There's some really cool stuff happening, and A Peek Through the Veil will be available this fall. It is the scariest thing that I've ever done because it's easy with The House in Between, because if they say it sucks, it's like a group of us, like we all suck. But if The Peek Through the Veil sucks, then it's just me, and our cat just jumped here, so she's here popping.
Hey, kitty cat! Meow! Meow! Famous cat.
Aww. Well, do you both have a moment to wait backstage till we wrap up?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you both so much. We'll talk to you in a moment.
Thank y'all. Okay.
Okay.
Poppins.
Oh my gosh, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in with us tonight. And I'm so glad that John and Amy got to share their story and we got to chat with them. But if you do find that you have questions or want to reach them, I'm glad they're easy to find on social media. So make sure to follow them so you can see all their projects too. And Keith, real quick, do you want to share what's going to happen with your question?
Yeah, so I'm going to, a couple of things real quick. So Brad Cooney put out a really cool post the other day, folks, and I'm going to just touch on this. So, John just talked about his book, okay? One of the things Brad touched on, and I think it's real important, go out and support these folks that are writing these books and writing from their heart, but also know one thing. Please respect the fact that they worked really hard, and don't be that odd person to say, hey, John, I'm your friend on Facebook. Can you send me an autograph free copy? Guys, they work their butts off. They have cost also with writing these and the other things it takes with that. So support them. Spend that little bit of coin to get a great book. You ask him to sign it, and I'm sure he will. But do that respect for the author, for the person, because Brad hit it on the head when he said that, and I back it wholeheartedly too. It's no different than a musician and a band that writes a really cool album. You don't walk up and say, hey, I want to see your concert for free, and I want to get your CD for free. So just know that, okay, support them, but support them in the way that they ask, and buy their stuff, because I'm sure it's going to be amazing. So here's something else. So we've been talking about, and you've been hearing me when we started this journey, our love and light listeners, all of you that are out there, me and Kelly, when we say this, we mean it. We reach out to you. Many of you we actually talk to, but we're going to start having questions like that on these shows, And when we ask the question, the first person to get the answer to that question will be getting some super cool. And I'm going to tell you everything from books to t-shirts and folks. Yes, listen, even some events. Yes, events. Like I supply the events, but you got to go show up, all right? Your travel, your hotel, your food is on you, but getting that event and having that stuff there for you to show up and say, hey, I'm the winner, and I work it out with a person for that event. So when I talk about really big stuff coming, yeah, like really big stuff, like the stuff you want to go do and see that I'm working out. So when we talk about it pays to be a listener for Talking Tech Paranormal, it does, because we're giving back to you, our love and light listeners. So you get to go, woohoo, rock it out, and enjoy it on us, on whatever it happens to be the gift we're giving away. So show and share the show. We talk about it all the time. Put it out there. Put it out there that you're saying, man, it was a great show. We loved it. It was fun. We're bringing these shows, folks, to all of you because these are the people that are some of the very top names in the paranormal. So you're getting to see, hear from, listen, learn from, a little talk, a little tech. But at the end of the day, it's for love. We love doing this show. And let me tell you, ask Kelly. I'll tell you, we put a lot of time into making these shows special, like we really do. So take that as being one of our people who we love, our love and light listeners, and getting a chance to win some of this stuff. It's going to be super cool. So we hope you enjoyed this show tonight.
Thanks,
I know
everybody.
it was so fun. It was so fun. And let me tell you, this was fun tonight, but who's going to be coming up on the next show? I
don't think we should tell them.
I will tell you though, it's going to be cool. You're going to go. You're going to be like, no, really? Yes, really.
In the next day or two, keep watching on our pages, and
so when you see it, you'll go, "Oh, come on, yes." So just hang on. It gets every time. It gets more and more and more fun. We love you guys. We mean it. Rock stars. We can't wait to see you on the next show. We love you guys.
Good night, everybody. Take care.
Night.
Bye.